This year, we're going back once again to talking about some of the TI calculators. Yes, I know, more TI calculators. That's kind of been a hobby of mine at some of these over the last couple of years. We talked about a number of them in the past. We talked about the SR56, which was the HP25 competitor. We talked about the TI 5859 several years ago with quirks, fast mode, high resolution graphics. So we talked about the high end. And we also talked about, of course, the white whale, the greatest that never was, the TI-88. And we talked about the TI-30, which I would call the low end, right? So I'm kind of going to go at the middle this year.
I got a question.
The middle, it's a word between the top and the...
Yeah. Has how many variations?
Billions of it's a lot. I don't know. I'd have to count the model number. The TI-30's been used, the model number for that's been used a bajillion times, it seems like. You're right. So,
Than the HP one, you know.
Quite right. Tons of them. And I want to thank Georg at datamath.org. Some of the pictures came from his site. If you don't go there, you really should. He's done a lot of amazing things on the TI side of the world. And without TI, I don't know that HP would have been what we all really enjoy and appreciate from HP. It required two competitors. So, there we go. So when I want to talk about these mid-range calculators, they're all going to start pretty much with this SR51. It was introduced in January of 1975. You see the picture over there. The SR50 before then had been, about a year before, had been TI's answer to the HP35. Yeah, it was a year and a half later, but it really was quite cost reduced compared to the HP35 and had some amazing features. Features that were not found even on the HP45. But it was this SR51 that really kind of kicked the pre-program standard up a bit. It's got a wide range of functions.
What did SR stand for, Gene?
Slide rule.
Yeah, slide rule, of course. From a pre-program perspective, it packed quite a punch. What did it have on it? You can look. Trigonometry, hyperbolics, linear regression, which I used a lot in high school, of course, mean variance and standard deviation, factorial, and permutations. One of the bizarre things to me of all time is permutations got a dedicated key, even though factorial was a shift. Never makes any sense to me. It had a random number generator, which would give you a 2-digit random number.
All TI calculators have random number generation.
Well, after this, it may be just for answers, perhaps, especially in the 10th place. But I remember wasting a great deal of time doing second random sigma plus to see what the average was going to be over an extended run. Why? I don't know. It had one. I did that. It also had 20 built-in conversions. You would press the second function key in a 2-digit number, and it would do a conversion pre-programmed into it. Some of which I never saw anywhere else, such as voltage ratio to decibels. I don't know of any other machine that ever had that built in by any means. And acres to square feet and mils to microns. So they had tons of those. 48, 20 years after. Yeah, quite right. But this was the SR51, which was not sold for very long, soon followed by this SR51A. Now, I know in here, several of us, this was one of the first machines we bought. I raised my hand, Bob, right? Because this was an incredibly useful machine for school and was cheap. I bought mine with lawnmower money and paid less than $60 for that thing and used it until the battery pack died. So it was very helpful. It was replaced with one in an industrial design, a case that was more similar to the rest of the models. It got rid of some of the colorful keys. So it fit in well with the family of machines being offered. From here, this line from the SR51, SR51A split into two directions. Programmability went the direction with what was codenamed the SR51P, with the P standing for programmability. Which became the SR56 and further, and a more modest pre-programmed line, right? A more modest pre-programmed line. But they had a problem. They wanted to split it into these two paths, right? The high end that eventually got to the TI 5859, but they wanted a pre-program that they were going to continue to grow and add a little bit of programmability to it. So this SR56, SR52 went to the high-end stuff for the 58, 59. They wanted to come out after the 51A with what they were going to call the TI-55, which most of us have seen. They still make good door stops if you have one of those. But it was going to be based on a one-chip design for their further cost down. So you wrote an article, Richard, about TI and the learning curve. They really were relentless with that. So they were going to a one-chip design for this TI-55 follow-on, but it wasn't ready yet. And so TI modified the SR51 with that next cost-down industrial design and came out with an interim model until the TI-55 was ready. And that interim model was this. It was called the SR51-2. That industrial design is what's used eventually for the TI-55, most of us have seen. And so it lost a few things, however. In the cost down, it loses things that the previous model had. It was introduced in 1976. In fact, it came out about a month after I bought my machine right before school started in 76. I don't regret what I got instead of this one. But they got rid of that BP1A battery pack. That was the fairly standard 3-cell battery pack that the 58, 59 still used. It was relatively easy to replace. They went with a much more complicated power pack for it. Gone was the 10+2 display. Before this time, the TI models had 10 digits and potentially 2 exponents, but just 10 digits, 10-2, 10, 10-2, that kind of thing. They went with a 10-digit, which became an 8+2. Now, the 10 digits were bigger, right, because they had the same width of the screen, so each LED was a little bigger, but you didn't have that lovely 10+2 that I think most of us wanted. They also got rid of that degree radiance switch. You could kind of predict that was going to go because that's a mechanical issue with the switch, and you can actually change degrees to radians or grads with a key on the keyboard. The SR56 had already done that by allowing you to change to radians mode from the keyboard instead of a switch, so they got rid of a mechanical issue. The new model also lost several functions compared to that 51A 51. What did it lose? It lost that random number generator, so no more laying on the bed hitting second random sigma plus instead of doing your chores. It also lost permutations. It had factorial, it lost permutations and lost 13 of the 20 conversions. So they really were trying again to cost it down. Several new features did get added, however. So you lost some things from the previous model. What was added that was new? Whoops. They added grads mode. All right, yeah. No, I'm kidding. They added grads mode. They did add correlation, which I found very interesting. That was a function that was always very useful. They added correlation. It's sitting over here on the stats row right there, right? Correlation. And they added engineering notation right above the scientific notation key. But it still had the same 3 data memories that the SR51 51A had. As mentioned, it was 10 or 8+2. Each digit was bigger. The biggest addition to this was finally adding algebraic hierarchy, which TI called the AOS. Yes, sir?
Was it 8+2 or 7+2?
This one is 8+2.
How do they separate
Good question. Rather than simply denying that there's a potential problem for that, I have to pause and say, good question. I can answer that when I get home, and I'll have a final answer for you in the morning. For some reason, I thought it was 8+2, but I've had typos on all sorts of things. They added parentheses, and you had 5 whopping pending operations that were available. 1 + 2 divided by, open parenthesis, 1 - 2 divided by, and you get complicated really quickly. But that's a whole lot better than the sum of the products, which is what the 51, 51A had, where it would do, my dear Aunt Sally, right? Multiplication and division before addition and subtraction. That was baked into the SR50, 51, and all that. But here you finally got algebraic hierarchy built into it. This model was sold for about a year. The first ad I found was in September of 76 at $68, and the last was on May the 6th at $49. I did find it for $40. This came from all those ads that are on the thumb drive that we presented a couple of years ago from newspapers. And the easy way to find this is there's a giant spreadsheet where somebody who had way too much time on his hands or did not have a life typed in all the dates of those ads and the dollar amount for about 40 different machines. Somebody who will remain nameless. He who must not be named, right? But you can highlight a column in that and set Excel to show the minimum or the max, and pretty easily you can see what the highest price advertised for a model was and what the lowest was. It's got all the HP and the TIs and even other brands just for kicks. But that made it easy to see the cheapest price for this SR51II. I don't know why, but I never owned one of those, but I've got 6 at the house. I think it's because I never had one. And I make sure they all work. Again, why? Well, okay, I know. Why would I ask that question to all of you? Why? We never asked that question, but I've got a bunch of those. I really don't understand why. They finally came out with a TI-55. Now, if you notice the display, those were photographed outside exactly the same, like 20 seconds apart. The refresh on the display is quite different. They changed it, costed it down. And slower, okay, because same exposure pretty much, I'm sure. But anyway, that was the number pi for this guy. It was finally hit the goal of adding limited programming to that SR51II. They could advertise this as programmable. It was introduced in '77, essentially at the same time that the 57, 58, 59 was, around May of '77. And it had, notice this, every single SR52 function, but added 32 steps of programming. Now I'm going to go back and look at the SR51-2. Do you see 4 empty spots on the shifted keyboard?
Yes.
Okay, right? We see one down here, that's one spot, and these 3. Yeah, okay, sure, that one up here, but come on. Second, I don't know about that. So there were 4 spots. The TI-55 filled them. Every shifted place is filled other than the second function. So what did they add? They added these 4 things right here. Learn mode to go in and key in a program, single step, reset, and run stop. That's it. Those are your programming features that the TI-55 had. More a macro capability simply to record. I would use this maybe if you needed to evaluate a function. Key in the calculation to evaluate the function, key in the X value, run stop, and get the Y result for the function. So that's what they did, 32 steps of programming. It did give you 10 memories instead of 3 that the others had. It was sold for 6 years. Long time for this LED model to be sold. Some functions were moved around, and I really don't understand. These things, they look green, but they're blue. There's not a blue shift key on this thing or something. I mean, why are they in blue? Why is that green up there and clear all? I mean, polar to rectangular. Maybe the conversions were meant to be blue for some reason, but they stick this one down here. I don't know. Who knows what they were doing when they were going through this stuff, right?
You know, one of the weirdest things about this machine is that the run stop is shift of a clear key. So if you don't get your shift, you've just cleared the values.
Well, I thought they should have made this clear all right there and put run stop above it.
Yeah.
That would have been even more fun, wouldn't it? Oh, rats! There goes my program. Yeah. Craig?
You use all the memory and all the programming steps either, because I think the top 2 memories were also program memory.
I think for the 55, I don't know that that's true. I know it is on the 57 models.
I had a 55.
I'll take your word for it. I've learned to not contradict Craig very often. That doesn't stop me sometimes, but I've got one of these that has had the same 9-volt battery in it for like 10 years. Still turns on. It seems like it will never die. Never die. I say, seems like. Okay, so on this 55, programming was very limited. That's all it had, right? Better than nothing at all, and of course helps with the marketing. The last ad for this was right at the end of 1981 for a whopping $29. In Europe, it was sold as the TI-51-3. Exactly the same here as the TI-55, okay? TI decided, well, we're progressing into the future. We need an LCD version of this thing. So they came out with the TI-55-2. Look at the funny red shifted keys. and all the programming stuff is grouped at least in a logical place up at the top, blue. They came out with the TI 55-2. It had such an awful keyboard that TI would routinely replace this at no questions asked with the current model. The same keyboard was in the TI 88. So as bad as this was, the TI 88 would have failed not only because of a feature deficit, but because of the cruddy keyboard that they put into it. It would produce double entries or no entries depending on its mood. You could try to sing to it and see if that would improve its response. Notice the red shift color, and it's the same keyboard. There really were no functional changes other than, I needed to call this out, that right there. It would do some sort of integration. Again, if the key registered. Right, if the key registered. It was so bad, I threw this one away. I threw away an HP 10B2, the really ugly Australian machine. I threw it away. That's the only HP I've ever thrown away. This is one of the few TIs I've ever thrown away. So they came out with a replacement, the TI 55-2 successors. Humorously, the one on the left is still called a TI 55-2. What a dumb thing that was. It has a reputation for a keyboard that doesn't respond, so let's come out with a replacement and call it the same model number where it'll be. Somebody woke up and said, hey, wait, that's probably not a good idea. After a production run and came out with the TI 55-3. This keyboard is fabulous. It never misses a keystroke. They should have hired those engineers to work on some of the HP calculators from the early 2000s. TI realized it would tank the model, so they changed it over there to the TI 55-3, exactly the same, but finally with a good keyboard. The displays were slightly different in terms of their visibility, however. All right, the other branch, that was this branch that was very low end, right? That'll go off well, won't it? I could talk to my son with all of you. Would you like to do that? It's his birthday, so he's calling Dad. That's what it is. Happy birthday, Christopher. I'll share the video with you. Okay, so the low end of pre-programmed with a little bit of programmability, okay? This is the slightly higher end of this mid-range going across. The TI 57, it was introduced as the low-cost successor to the 56. Now, in the PPC journal, Jim Davidson, who had been Mr. HP 25, he was on record as saying that by and large, the SR56 could handle problems that the HP 25 could not. And he did not know of anything that the 25 could do that the 56 could not do. He actually said 100 unmerged was better than 50 merged. So the factor, RPN aside, I understand, but the factor of 50 merged versus 100 unmerged, he said the 100 unmerged would win almost all the time, okay? But this was the low-cost successor, May 24th, 77. Look at the sales brochure. The key to its value is a remarkable advance in integrated circuit technology, a single MOS LSI chip with the equivalent capacity of 30,000 transistors.
30,000.
30,000, can you believe it?
That's transistors, not gates.
That's transistors, 30,000 of them. I wonder how many of them are in the Coke cup that he's got. I mean, how many transistors are on some of the processors we've got now?
Billion.
30,000. I love it. 30,000. But that was a big deal at the time. TI was marching that learning curve down, right? It did have 50 fully merged steps and 8 data memories. The display, my apologies, Craig. I say again, 8 plus 2, but maybe 7.2, maybe not. I don't know. But it was fairly dim. It had the same battery pack. They switched the battery packs when they killed off the SR51-2. Each program step could store up to 4 key presses, 4 merged, because inverse second product 1 would take 1 step and it would divide memory 1 by the value in the display. So you got a lot of key presses, which were always the marketing arguing point, right? Keying in an average complexity 50-step program on the 57 into the 58C, right, the higher end TI, would usually take about 80 steps. So it was about 80 TI 58, 59 steps. So it's still not too bad. A lot of stuff can be done on that TI 57 right there. If you multiply the 8 memories by 8 bytes and then add the 50 bytes of program memory, it had 114 total bytes of memory stuff, right? Data and program. Functions, it had trig, inverses, a couple of conversions and inverses, mean and variance, logs and anti-log storage arithmetic, programmable, much better than the 55, 10 labels, subroutines, integer fraction, absolute value, pause, no op, 4 conditional tests against the, you know this, the T register, right? The test register, insert delete step, looping, and as I say, 2 levels of subroutines. So quite a lot of oomph in this little El Cheapo model. Although there were some limitations, even though it had 8 memory registers, when evaluating an expression with 3 or 4 pending operations, TI stole memories 5 and 6 away from you. It put the values, the data points in the expression into memories 5 and 6. Memory 7 is actually the T register. What a bizarre thing that is. So if you do X exchange T, that's this little button right there. That's the same thing as saying second exchange 7. It's just a shortcut. So there is no extra T register, it's just memory 7, marketing. And so memories 0 through 4 were really the ones that were fairly available. DSZ, decrement, and skip on 0, you always use memory 0. Statistical functions used 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7. So a whole lot of cross usage everywhere. You had to be real careful with this. You could use the last 2 program steps and turn your TI-57 into a TI-57C. It essentially turns off the display, but the machine is on. It saves the program, and it uses less power than the TI-58C does when you turn it off. Kind of humorous. It's on. I mean, it's bizarre. To get the steps in you got to do, it's like press 10 keys in a row. It's a Joe Horn kind of thing. But it will turn the display off, the thing is still on, and it uses an incredibly small amount of power.
How do you get the display back on?
You've got to have a jujitsu kind of thing, a Ouija board to get it on. It's complicated for that too. One other note, it is incredibly slow. The little counting loop, +1 equals, and then reset to go back and keep running that loop, goes to about 280 in 60 seconds compared to the 480 on the 25. It's pretty slow. But, you know, if you're on a budget, it is programmable. Quite a few very complicated programs have been written with this. Exact factorial of like the number 52, all digits, have been programmed into this thing, and a lot of other stuff. They tried their LCD version of this. This is the TI-57 LCD. It was introduced in '82, and to me it's one of the more garish looking units ever made. I think the designers worked on the 33S. I mean, that's just ugly. It also looks like it could have been a prop from Space 1999. Overall memory capacity in this model to the 57 was down about 50%. It says it has the same number of steps. It says it has the same number of data memories, but there's so much cannibalization as you put more program steps in that no, it's not the same. And it's got that cruddy keyboard, right? It's terrible. This is the same one. Hello, you know, anybody there to try to get a key to register. So it had the TI-57 had 50 and 8, right? 50 program steps and 8 memories. This one said 49 with 1 memory or 8 memories with 0. So there was a trade-off rate of 7 each. Fortunately, right, it did add factorial, clear program, but the most incredibly useful function is this one. Where are we now? Right there. You see that shift function right there? With 8 program memories, you can tell it how many data memories to have. You can execute a function from the keyboard and change that from 8 to 3 if you want. Give me a break. I mean, there's only 8 memories in the whole machine. You want to program into the firmware something to be able to change it from 1 to 4 to 6? I mean, I understand if you got 60 data memories like the TI-58, you may want to move that around a bit, but it converts automatically if you key in a program anyway. I don't understand that at all. That was just really strange. TI-57 LCD, don't waste your time. There's a lot of those on eBay right now. I wonder why. The display is nice and crisp up there, however. It also did drop the statistics. Where'd the statistics functions go? Who knows? Write a program for it if you can fit it into about 10 steps. So they did come out with the TI-57-2. It got rid of the ugly keyboard, finally put, the good stuff. The same thing as that TI-55-3, remember that one? Right? It looks nice. It works. It got rid of that garish color scheme. I think I spelled it with 2 R's on the previous slide. The functions were the same as the previous model, same industrial design as the 55-3, so it got rid of some issues with the production line too. It's very light, easy to carry, not bad. So, real quick, when you look at that one, there's some of that one on eBay as well. The question I always ask is right now, which model are you all going to buy? Which TI model can I push into your mind so that you have to purchase one? Well, first of all, forget all the ones I just talked about. Make sure you at least have like an SR51 or 51A and a 56. If you're going to have any TIs at all, you really ought to have maybe those two, and I've also suggested the 58C. They all use the same battery pack, so one good battery pack will run them all. Okay? Only if you have those in your collection, locked away in the vault. Okay? To consider any of the rest of these. I do think, seriously, I do think these deserve a spot in, those of us who are collectors. I mean, look, I'm an HP guy, I really am. I know I'm talking about TI, but a couple of these ought to be on the shelf someplace. Because. So out of the new ones, the original 57 has that prestige of coming out with the 58-59. That was a big deal. The 58-59 had all the fancy-dancy technology, but the 57 was cheap. And it gave programmability cheaply to the masses. The same way the TI-30 brought trig to the masses, very, very cheap. The 57 did that with the programmability, and it was pretty respectable in terms of what it could do. As I say, programs exist that will compute the first 58 digits of E on this thing and to calculate the exact factorial of 52. I think I said 57. Pretty amazing in such a limited space, okay? So, the SR51-2 and the 55 are honorable mentions. You got to cut it off somewhere, and I do know this is TI. I understand. Avoid all the others that were on the slide. Do not buy that Space 1999 prop. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
At some point, TI stopped making their own chips and used Toshiba. When did that happen?
The first one I know about, I think, was the TI-66, but I'm likely not right on that. I know TI did not make the horizontal Voyager-style TI-66 programmable model. That was a Toshiba design. I don't know if that was the first one, but they did start outsourcing, and sometimes they'd bring it back.
Now, you also recommended 58C. However, I'd want to warn people that the 58C had the tendency to lose the ability to save its constant memory. There are lots of them out there that do not actually work after you turn the power off. You turn them back on, it didn't keep it. And that was a real well-known issue.
It could also be somebody had scratched the faceplate to put a fake C at the bottom. I'm kidding. The 58-59 had their own issues. This is one of them, right? They would also have memory that would not keep you would type in a program and it would keep its own value. It wouldn't take the value of the key you just pressed. Memory issues sometimes. The 59 was horrible because the card reader wouldn't work in most of them. Bob happens to have one that reads the cards. It's a dodo bird. So you got to worry about that. That's why when I go back to these guys, as long as the battery prongs are not broken off, they're going to work most of the time. Those 51s, the real original in the 50s, when I buy one of those dirt cheap off eBay, they all work. They all work. I get to these, most of them work as long as the prongs are off. The newer you get, the less likely they are to still work. They built those old ones like tanks, just like HP did with their old models too. Okay?
So I seem to recall, I lived in Dallas, TI's there, Collins Radio was there. My father bought an employee sale of some sort. I believe it was an SR51, and he got it cheap because there were bugs in the hyperbolic functions. Does that sound familiar?
I'm not aware of any, and I don't know that I've seen that on the DataMath site either.
Yeah, I haven't been able to trace it down, and I unfortunately did not get his calculator.
Maybe both of the people that use that couldn't agree on exactly.
Hyperbolics. Somebody was hanging a power line between two towers. When I had to write some training materials on hyperbolics for some of HP's, I struggled to get examples. So I went to advertising brochures TI had used and copied their problems to put in the HP documents, which is humorous. There are TI marketing examples from SR51 brochures in the HP training materials I did.
Gene, for the people who aren't familiar, those models that Tim could use, the printer.
Which
Which ones could use the printer?
the PC100 and 100C, the little, take the battery pack out and put it on the little printer. The 58 and 59 certainly could use it. The 56 and 52 could. Some 51s can. Some 51s can, which is strange. It seems like they wanted it to hook onto the printer and then gave up toward the very end.
It's a unique feature. I thought, those that weren't familiar, it's great.
I mean, I remember in high school, a friend of mine had a 59 with a printer, and I got this little strip of thermal paper given to us, several of it. He'd made a program to print out Merry Christmas in the shape of a Christmas tree, which he did it on a whole lot of keying and decimal numbers to get those alpha codes in there. But yeah, Jeff?
Further with the PC printer, I picked one up, and of course no key, and the 59 is locked in. There's a number, I think it's 1 to 300 on the bezel of the key, the insert part, whatever you call it. You're missing.
Yeah.
You then go to the company, and if you get on the net and do a search, it'll tell you the company. You send in that number, and boom, for $5 you got 2 keys in the mail, and that was 2 months ago.
That is cheaper to get a key for a PC100 or PC100A or C that does not have it. You can find this number and contact the company. It's on the little round thing and get it. It's a lot cheaper than carrying it to a locksmith, which is what I did. But I was trying to get the SR52 off of the thing. I didn't care about the printer. And he did make a key at the locksmith, because that was more expensive. Anything else? Look, again, I know we're HP, but some of these things, I just want to make sure we're aware of them. I tell you what, don't buy any of the SR51s on eBay. You don't want them. You don't want, they're terrible. Just let them go. Forget I ever said that.
How many do you have?
Well, if you don't buy any, I may have a few more. Yes, sir.
You didn't say much about the SR52, and I know it's not mid-range, it was top end then. But because you mentioned it seemed fairly early on that the BP1A was no longer being used for some of the mid-range ones, but the 52 took the BP1 and BP1A.
The 52 was introduced in mid to early 76 and was about a year and a half. And it was when they were discontinuing the 52, which had the BP1A, the same standard battery pack, that the 5859 continued to use. It was the cheaper mid-range models that dropped that battery pack.
That they aged out of using that.
Oh no.
They were switching to a cheaper way to...
The 51, the pre-programmed stuff, right? And the 56 and the 51.2 is really where they broke it and went to a different kind of battery pack.
Now you also, I didn't see you mention, these were all scientifics, I didn't see you mention the programmer, the LCD.
True.
The programmer was absolutely garbage keyboard. Just another one of those that was really terrible to work with.
Yeah, they made a couple of programmers. They made the LED one and an LCD one. Most of what I can tell, it looks just like all it does is base conversions. That's it. Very little. I mean, some of them may have had an and or an or, but not much. Anyway, thank you all for listening to TI stuff. I do appreciate it.